Keanu Reeves walked into the company lobby quietly. No suit. No assistant. Just a worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers that had clearly seen better days. The receptionist barely glanced up from her screen. "Appointment?" she asked without looking at him. "No," he said softly. Her finger pointed toward a narrow hallway. "You'll have to wait there." Keanu nodded and walked over as if he had nowhere else to be. He sat down on a cold metal chair, letting his hands rest lightly on his knees. His face showed nothing, no anger, no impatience, but there was a calm in him that seemed to demand notice, whether anyone realized it or not. Around him, the lobby buzzed with people who had no idea who he was. Young interns rushed past with coffee trays. Secretaries whispered behind closed doors. Executives in sharp suits glanced at him once, then looked away. The atmosphere was casual, almost indifferent, except for the quiet energy he brought simply by existing there. No one offered him water. No one smiled. No one acknowledged that he was sitting there. For most people, it would have been a minor inconvenience, an empty chair in a busy lobby. But this wasn't just any man waiting to be seen. Keanu Reeves was the majority owner of the company, the man who controlled 53% of everything in that building. And yet, to them he was just another stranger. 7 minutes passed. A few executives walked past him, one glancing at his worn sneakers with a smirk, another laughing into their phone as if to say, "Who let this guy in?" He said nothing. He didn't fidget. He didn't react. But the silence he carried was heavy, as if it weighed on the room itself. In that moment, the receptionist, the interns, and the boardroom executives didn't realize something crucial. They had just underestimated him. They had judged him by the jacket, by the sneakers, by the calm quiet he exuded. And in under an hour they would all learn the truth. Most people inside that building had no idea who he was. They had seen the name Keanu Reeves on some emails. Maybe in a quarterly report or a board memo. Maybe on the plaque in the reception area. But that was all. He had no fancy introductions, no press appearances, no staged photo ops. 4 years he had remained almost invisible in the company he owned. And yet, he owned 53% of it, a controlling stake in everything that buzzed and moved inside those walls. Every desk, every department, every decision in that building was, at some level, under his authority. The contracts, the profits, the mergers, the layoffs, all his. But today he wasn't here to assert power. He wasn't here to command attention. Not yet. He came unannounced, not for recognition, but for observation. To see what truth lay beneath the polished floors, designer chairs, and glass walls. To see how people treated those they thought had no power. He watched from the lobby as people passed. The receptionist typing furiously on her keyboard, seemingly oblivious to the man sitting silently across from her. An assistant laughing at a joke on her phone, not even glancing in his direction. Executives, sharp in their suits, moving with confidence, not realizing that the person they ignored was the one who signed their paychecks, who controlled their careers. The lobby had become a stage. And he was watching every act, every glance, every whisper. 4 years, Keanu had stayed away from appearances like this. Emails, calls, reports, he trusted his team to run the company without his presence. He had built something bigger than himself and it was in capable hands. But sometimes distance could breed arrogance. Sometimes people needed a reminder, a quiet, unassuming figure walking into their world to show them the mirror. Today he was that mirror. He noticed the subtle disrespect first. A junior executive glancing at his worn jacket, muttering something to a colleague. A senior manager, eyes flicking toward the lobby, shrugging as if he were nothing. Even the security guards, trained to recognize authority, didn't make eye contact. 7 minutes passed. 10 minutes. Every second revealed more about the culture of the place. Who valued people for their work, who valued titles, and who valued appearances over integrity. Keanu Reeves didn't fidget. He didn't intervene. He simply observed. And in doing so, he uncovered what most leaders never want to see, the truth about human behavior when hierarchy is assumed, but power is ignored. He had seen this before, in boardrooms, on sets, in personal encounters. People revealed their true selves when they believed no one important was watching. And now he was watching. The company wasn't just a business. It was a living ecosystem. Every interaction mattered. Every slight, every dismissive glance, every whispered joke, it all revealed who people really were. Keanu shifted slightly in his seat, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to make a small change in the rhythm of the room. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it carried the weight of someone who had seen more than anyone suspected. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever noticed how people treat you when they think you're unimportant? Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever tested the room silently to see the truth behind smiles and handshakes? Today the company would reveal itself. And Keanu Reeves was ready to learn and to act. Because this visit wasn't about him. It was about them. He sat there quietly, motionless, yet completely aware. Executives walked past him, heads high, eyes forward. They didn't see him. Or if they did, they didn't acknowledge him. One man paused briefly, glanced at the worn leather jacket, and smirked, whispering something to his colleague. Another laughed loudly into a phone call, showing off a deal he had just closed. Behind the glass walls of the boardroom, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed. Expensive watches glimmered under the overhead lights. Whiskey glasses were raised, compliments traded, jokes told, all while he sat in silence. 7 minutes passed. 10. 15. No one offered him a seat closer to the desk. No one asked if he wanted water or coffee. No one even nodded in recognition. For the people in that building, he was just a stranger. Someone insignificant, maybe a visitor lost in the wrong place. But Keanu Reeves wasn't just anyone. He was the co-founder, the majority shareholder, the person who controlled more than half of the company's assets. The man whose signature could approve or halt every major transaction in that building. And yet, in their eyes, he had no importance. It was subtle, quiet, yet devastating. The kind of disrespect that doesn't hit in one moment, but slowly seeps in, revealing the arrogance and carelessness of those who believe status is earned through appearance alone. He observed every micro-expression, every smirk, every moment of dismissal. The way some employees straightened their ties when they thought no one was watching. The way others whispered, assuming their words were private. The quiet assumptions that no one of consequence would ever sit there unnoticed. It was almost comical, if it weren't so telling. Some people think power is in noise, in authority, in being seen. But Keanu understood something deeper. True power is calm, unshakable, and invisible until revealed. And arrogance? Arrogance always shows itself when it thinks no one important is paying attention. The receptionist looked up again, caught between curiosity and hesitation. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The interns shuffled past nervously, sensing something unspoken in the air. And yet, no one acted. 7 minutes became 15. 15 became 20. The silence in the lobby grew heavier with each passing second. Every passing glance, every ignored gesture, every slight, it all added up. It wasn't about the clothes, the jacket, the sneakers. It was about character. It was about the failure to recognize another human being, the lack of basic respect. Keanu Reeves didn't frown. He didn't look angry. He simply observed. Because sometimes the most powerful response is doing nothing at all, letting the truth reveal itself. And in that lobby, truth was showing its face. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever been judged by your appearance alone? Backhand index pointing right. Have you been ignored while people assumed you didn't matter? Backhand index pointing right. How does it feel when arrogance masks itself as confidence? For those executives, for that receptionist, for those interns, this was a moment of unintentional revelation. They had dismissed someone important. Someone who had been patient, calm, and unassuming. And what they didn't yet know was that patience and calmness can hold a power far greater than arrogance ever could. Keanu Reeves stood up. Calm. Measured. Unhurried. Every movement deliberate, every step silent yet filled with weight. He walked toward the glass boardroom doors, each stride echoing in the polished lobby like a soft drumbeat, signaling that something was about to change. The executives inside glanced toward the glass walls. One of them, a senior manager with a perfectly pressed suit, straightened in his chair and frowned. "Who is that?" he muttered under his breath. The receptionist froze for a second, unsure whether to stop him or wave him through. The intern stepped aside instinctively, sensing the presence of someone who didn't belong, or at least someone they assumed didn't. He didn't speak. He didn't announce himself. He didn't demand attention. He simply walked. And yet, every person in that room could feel it, a shift in the air, an unspoken authority that wasn't loud but undeniable. One of the board members, mid-laugh, suddenly noticed him through the glass. "Hey, who are you?" The voice carried a hint of irritation, maybe even mild amusement. It was the tone people use when they assume someone is a mistake, a nuisance, or unimportant. Keanu Reeves stopped just outside the doors. He didn't reply. He didn't smile. He reached into the pocket of his worn jacket and pulled out a single black card, sleek, minimal, almost unassuming. But the name and title printed on it were not. The room fell silent. Faces changed instantly. Smiles vanished. Glasses were forgotten in midair. The laughter that had filled the room seconds ago died before it even reached the end of a sentence. Every head turned. Every eye locked on the card. The manager who had scoffed before now paled. The senior executive who had whispered jokes froze mid-motion, gripping his pen tightly. Every person realized at the same moment what they had failed to recognize. The man standing calmly before them in a leather jacket and old sneakers was the majority owner of the company. 53%. Half the company. All their jobs, all their projects, all their decisions, under his control. The realization hit them like a wave. Embarrassment. Panic. Every subtle disrespect from the past 20 minutes, every dismissive glance, every whispered joke, it all came crashing back. They had underestimated him. They had assumed weakness where there was none. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't lecture. He let the silence do the work. Every second of it drove the truth deeper. Arrogance had no place here. Assumptions had consequences. Finally, the senior manager cleared his throat. I didn't realize. His voice faltered. He wanted to explain, apologize, justify, anything to fill the growing void of tension in the room. Keanu Reeves' eyes scanned the room, calm, assessing, unshaken. He placed the card gently on the polished table. The sound of it sliding across the surface seemed louder than any shout, louder than any angry words. It was a statement. A quiet, undeniable statement of presence and authority. Silence. Total. Absolute. Every person in that room understood it now. They had been wrong. They had judged the wrong person. And in that silence, Keanu Reeves didn't need to say more. The room had already spoken to him, and he had already seen the truth. The card wasn't just a name. It was a mirror reflecting back every mistake, every arrogance, every misjudgment. For the first time that morning, the boardroom was no longer a room of laughter and whispered power. It was a room of clarity, of revelation, of raw understanding. They finally knew. This wasn't a man to be underestimated. This wasn't a man to ignore. This was Keanu Reeves. And he had been watching all along. Before anyone could speak, the door opened again. An employee entered cautiously, holding a stack of files so thick it threatened to spill over. His hands shook slightly and his voice trembled as he spoke. They were planning to sell the company, he said. The room froze. Words hung in the air like shards of glass. Every executive, every manager, every assistant stared at him, trying to process what they had just heard. The idea was unthinkable, undeniable, dangerous. Secret deals, hidden transfers, financial maneuvers executed without proper authorization. Hundreds of employees at risk. Entire departments could vanish overnight. Families depending on their paychecks could be blindsided. And all of it had been happening right under their noses. The files in his hands weren't just paper. They were evidence, a roadmap of betrayal. Contracts unsigned by proper authorities, emails deleted from official servers, plans drafted in shadows. Keanu Reeves didn't need to read every line. He had already seen the truth. But now the rest of the company would see it too. Executives shifted uneasily. Some exchanged panicked glances. The senior manager who had laughed moments ago now clutched his chair, as if it could protect him. The woman who had whispered about misplaced priorities felt her heart race. The interns glanced at each other, eyes wide, realizing they were witnessing a turning point, a moment when arrogance collided with consequence. Keanu Reeves stepped closer, his presence calm but commanding. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He let the files speak for themselves. But the silence in the room was louder than any shout. The plans were to sell, the trembling employee repeated. Departments, assets, everything. People would have lost their jobs. Entire teams could disappear without notice. And no one would have known until it was too late. Every head in the room lowered slightly, shame creeping into their expressions. They had assumed the company's co-founder, its majority owner, would never come unannounced. They had assumed their small acts of arrogance, their subtle dismissals, would go unnoticed. They had assumed everything. Keanu Reeves observed them quietly, reading each face. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was assessing, measuring, understanding not just the betrayal, but the culture that allowed it to happen. For a moment, it was as if time slowed. Every second stretched, emphasizing the gravity of what had been uncovered. The company wasn't just being mismanaged. It was being undermined from within, by people who valued personal gain over integrity, who mistook arrogance for leadership, and who thought silence could hide their intentions. Keanu finally spoke, his voice low but unwavering. So this This is what happens when people believe they can act without accountability. The words didn't startle them. The silence did. Every person in the room felt the weight of those words more than the words themselves. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to lecture. Power, when quiet and deliberate, speaks louder than any anger. The trembling employee handed over the files. Keanu took them, flipping through carefully. Each page confirmed what the whispers had already suggested: manipulation, deception, greed. He placed the stack neatly on the table as if ordering chaos into structure, bringing clarity to confusion. "This isn't about me," he said finally, looking around at every face. "It's about integrity. It's about how a company treats its people, and how its people treat each other. Disrespect is one thing. Betrayal, that's something else entirely." The room was heavy with tension. Executives shifted in their chairs. Some swallowed hard, others clenched fists in helplessness. But one thing was undeniable: the stakes had escalated far beyond personal slights. What began as an underestimation in the lobby had become a full-scale revelation of what the company had become when arrogance and secrecy prevailed. Keanu Reeves didn't smile. He didn't shout. He didn't gesture. He simply stood there, calm, deliberate, and fully aware of the power balance. And in that moment, the employees and executives realized, this wasn't about revenge. This was about truth. And truth, as they were about to learn, has a way of demanding action. Keanu Reeves looked around the room. The silence was almost deafening. Executives, managers, and interns alike were frozen in a mix of fear and disbelief. Every eye was on him, waiting, wondering, questioning. They had underestimated him in the lobby. They had ignored him, judged him by his worn leather jacket and old sneakers. And now they were beginning to see just how serious that mistake had been. "I didn't come here to be recognized," he said quietly, his voice calm, almost soft. But beneath that softness was a weight that carried authority beyond any title or status. "I came to observe." Heads shifted. Murmurs began. Some tried to explain, apologize, justify, even laugh nervously. He ignored all of it. He didn't need excuses. He didn't need recognition. He only needed to see the truth. "How you treat people you think don't matter," he continued, his eyes scanning every face, "tells me everything about who you are. It tells me what kind of company we are. And it tells me how we value integrity." The files sat on the table, evidence of secret deals and hidden betrayals. Keanu reached for them, flipping through quietly, methodically. Every document confirmed the whispers he had suspected. Departments were being sold. Positions were being compromised. Hundreds of employees' futures were being decided behind closed doors, without accountability or oversight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam the papers down. He simply paused, letting the weight of the situation settle into the room. And the room responded. The executives, who had laughed and whispered only minutes ago, now felt the full gravity of their actions. Then he spoke again. "This isn't personal. It's about principles. It's about standards. And it's about respect." He looked directly at the senior manager who had scoffed at him in the lobby. "Your behavior, your arrogance, your dismissiveness, it all ends today." Keanu didn't wait for protest. He didn't need to. He reached for the phone and spoke to security, his tone calm but unmistakable. "Escort everyone involved in these transactions to the review room. Effective immediately. Pending investigation." Within seconds, the atmosphere shifted. Power that had seemed untouchable vanished. Executives who had thought they were untouchable now stood with uncertainty etched across their faces. Arrogance, which had felt safe behind polished desks and glass walls, evaporated. The rest of the room, the interns, the assistants, the junior staff, watched in stunned silence. They had expected chaos, shouting, confrontation. But instead, they witnessed precision, calm authority, and clear action. Keanu Reeves didn't need to shout to command attention. His decisions spoke louder than any words could. He paused, looking over the remaining employees. This company isn't defined by titles. It isn't defined by appearances or status. It's defined by character. And character is measured by how we treat people, especially those who have no apparent power. Some executives swallowed hard. Others looked down at the floor, guilt weighing them down. The lesson was clear. Disrespect has consequences and secrecy breeds collapse. Keanu didn't just punish arrogance. He set a standard. He made it known that this company would no longer tolerate deception or disregard for others. Respect was not optional. Integrity was not optional. And no one, not even a senior manager, could assume immunity. The room felt heavier with understanding. And yet, there was relief too. a recognition that fairness, when applied decisively, restores order more than fear ever could. He turned, walking calmly out of the boardroom, leaving a room transformed. Silence lingered, but it was no longer tense. It was reflective. Everyone present understood that power without principle is meaningless, and arrogance without accountability is dangerous. Keanu Reeves had made his decision. It was decisive, it was fair, and it was unforgettable. The boardroom was quiet but not tense anymore. The executives who had been escorted out were now in review rooms, facing consequences that were firm but fair. Security had acted swiftly, yet with discretion, and the rest of the employees were left in a mix of relief and uncertainty. Keanu Reeves remained standing in the center of the main office space, his presence calm, approachable, yet undeniably authoritative. The worn leather jacket and scuffed sneakers that had caused so much judgment just hours ago now felt almost symbolic, a quiet reminder that power and respect are not measured by appearances, titles, or suits. The employees gathered, their faces a mixture of awe, anxiety, and curiosity. For some, it was their first time seeing the co-founder in person. For others, it was the first time they had seen the company's majority owner act decisively, not just through memos or reports, but in the flesh, confronting the truth and addressing the culture of the organization head-on. "Your jobs are safe," Keanu said, his voice steady, carrying a calm reassurance. Relief swept through the room like a wave. Some employees exhaled audibly, shoulders relaxing. Others simply nodded, processing the weight of the day. "This company will never judge people by their clothing, titles, or status," he continued. "Because real character is shown in how you treat people you believe have no power. Arrogance hides in confidence, but it is always revealed when it assumes immunity. Today you saw that firsthand." A young assistant spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, does this mean we can trust the leadership moving forward?" Keanu Reeves nodded slowly. "Trust is built through actions, not words. And it's my responsibility to ensure those actions reflect integrity, fairness, and respect at every level." He walked slowly through the room, making eye contact with employees, connecting with them individually, but never stopping for applause or acknowledgement. His presence alone commanded respect. Not fear, not intimidation, but genuine attention. "Leadership is not about asserting power," he said, "and it's not about punishing people because they fail. Leadership is about creating a culture where respect is non-negotiable, where decisions are guided by integrity, and where people are valued for their character as much as their contribution." Some employees began to share their own experiences quietly, recounting moments of disrespect or observation of arrogance. Keanu listened, not interrupting, letting them be heard. There was no judgment in his expressions, only understanding and recognition that the culture of an organization is shaped by every individual, not just the executives. He paused by the boardroom window, looking out at the city beyond. The sun was low, casting long shadows that reminded everyone that the day was almost over, but the lessons would linger much longer. "This company belongs to all of you," he said softly, "because integrity, character, and respect are not enforced from the top down alone. They are created, nurtured, and protected by every person who works here." Some employees whispered to one another, reflecting on the chain of events. The young intern who had been nervously delivering files now stood taller, inspired. The receptionist who had dismissed him in the lobby earlier looked down for a moment, shame mixing with relief. Even the senior executives, having witnessed the consequences of their arrogance, nodded subtly, acknowledging that respect cannot be assumed, it must be practiced. Keanu Reeves finally turned to address the room as a whole. "You were ignored because some people assumed you didn't matter. And arrogance always exposes itself. But that can change. That will change. Not because I demand it, but because we choose to hold ourselves accountable, every day in every interaction." He paused again, letting his words sink in. "This isn't about me. It's about all of us. It's about making sure that this company, our workplace, our shared environment, reflects what we believe in: honesty, fairness, and respect. That's how a company thrives. That's how people grow. That's how culture is built." For the first time that day, a quiet murmur of understanding swept through the room. Employees exchanged glances, realizing the truth. Respect isn't given, it's earned through behavior. Character isn't measured by power or status, but by the choices we make when no one is watching, or when someone powerful is quietly observing. Keanu Reeves adjusted his jacket, a subtle gesture of finality, and smiled lightly. "Let this day serve as a reminder," he said, "that the strength of any company lies not in its profits or in its buildings, or even in its leadership alone. The true strength lies in how we treat each other when we think no one is paying attention. That is the measure of real character. The employees nodded. Relief, understanding, and inspiration settled across the room. The fear that had gripped them earlier was replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. They had witnessed leadership in its purest form, calm, decisive, fair, and uncompromising when it mattered most. And as Keanu Reeves walked quietly out of the room, leaving the boardroom and lobby behind, one thing was clear to everyone present. Arrogance may hide behind power, but integrity always reveals itself, and respect, once earned, lasts far longer than fear ever could. Backhand index pointing right. Do you think Keanu made the right decisions? Backhand index pointing right. Should executives be held accountable for their arrogance? Backhand index pointing right. How would you act if you were in a position of authority? Speech balloon. Comment below. Thumbs up like if you believe respect should be unconditional. Repeat button. Share this with someone who needs this reminder.